January 26, 1945. A frozen field on the edge of a village called Holtzwihr, deep in the Alsace region of eastern France. The temperature sits far below freezing. Snow lies over the churned gray ground, and a thin, freezing mist clings to the tree line. Standing at the edge of those woods is a young lieutenant who looks less like an officer than a boy who wandered into the wrong uniform. He is barely 20 years old. He weighs less than the pack some of his men carry. His name is Audie Murphy, and in the next 60 minutes, the German soldiers moving toward him across that snow are about to witness something they will spend the rest of their lives unable to explain. Because from where those Germans stand, this looks easy. 6 armored vehicles grind out of the far woods, their tracks throwing up snow. Behind them, spread across the white field, come roughly 250 infantry, gray and white shapes against a gray and white world. And ahead of them sits a shattered American company that has just been ordered to fall back into the trees. The road to the village looks open. The Americans look broken. Or so it seems. This is not the story of the most decorated American soldier of the Second World War. Not yet. This is the story of the skinny kid the United States military tried again and again to send home, and the frozen afternoon the German army discovered exactly what it had underestimated. The question hanging over that field should be impossible to answer. How does one man, a soldier so small the recruiters kept turning him away, stop a company of German infantry backed by armor alone and live to watch the sun go down? To understand that, you have to leave the snow of Holtzwihr for a moment and go back a few years to a dusty recruiting office in Texas where nobody wanted him. Audie Murphy was born into a Texas sharecropping family, one of 12 children in a house with no money and no margin for error. His father drifted away and never came back. His mother died while he was still a teenager. He grew up hunting small game in the fields around Greenville, not for sport, but because a missed shot often meant an empty plate that night. It made him a marksman before it made him a soldier. He was small, quiet, and looked years younger than he was. When the war came, he tried to enlist, and the doors closed one after another. The Marines took one look at his height and his weight and turned him away. The paratroopers rejected him too. He was barely 17, weighing somewhere around 110 pounds, and he only slipped into the army at all after his older sister signed a document swearing he was a year older than he really was. Even once he was in, they looked at his slight frame and tried to steer him toward a cook's apron, well behind the lines. He refused. He had not lied his way into a uniform to peel potatoes. Everyone who looked at Audie Murphy saw the same thing. Something small. Something breakable. Something that belonged in a schoolyard, not on a battlefield. It was the exact mistake the German army was about to make on a far larger scale and pay for. Because the boy the recruiters kept sending home did not break. He hardened. By January 1945, that quiet kid from Texas had fought his way across Sicily, up the brutal beaches and hills of Italy, and through the invasion of southern France. He had been wounded. He had watched close friends die. He had been pulled from the enlisted ranks and handed a battlefield commission. A lieutenant's bars given, not for Polish, but for the simple fact that he kept surviving and kept leading when the men above him fell. The schoolboy face had not changed. Everything behind it had. Now, to understand what he was standing in the middle of, you have to zoom out from that single frozen field and look at the map, and at why the German soldiers coming toward him were fighting so hard for a patch of France they had already, in every strategic sense, lost. By the winter of 1945, Germany was being crushed from both directions. In the east, the Red Army was grinding toward the German border in numbers that defied belief. In the west, the Allies had recovered from the shock of the Ardennes and were pressing toward the Rhine. But here, in Alsace, one stubborn bulge of German-held territory remained on the French side of the river. Military maps called it the Colmar Pocket. For the German command, this frozen salient had become a matter of pride and propaganda, a piece of occupied France they had been ordered to hold to the last man, long after holding it made any real sense. To clear it, the American and French forces would have to fight through minefields, icy villages, and dug-in defenders in some of the coldest weather of the entire war. And so the men of the 3rd Infantry Division found themselves attacking through snow-choked forests, village by village, against an enemy with nothing left to lose. Frostbite filled the aid stations alongside the wounded. Rifles froze. The ground was too hard to dig. Into this, on January 26, walked Audie Murphy and what was left of his command. On paper, Murphy commanded Company B of the 15th Infantry Regiment. On paper, an American rifle company numbered well over 100 men. Murphy had 19 exhausted, half-frozen soldiers, dug in as best they could at the edge of the Holtzwihr woods. In support, he had 2 American M10 tank destroyers, long, open-top steel hunters built around a 3-inch gun, crewed by men just as cold and just as tired as the infantry. For a while it was quiet, the kind of quiet that soldiers learned to distrust. Then the far tree line came alive. 6 German tanks and tank destroyers rolled out into the open, engines snarling, and behind them the infantry rose up out of the snow and came on in waves, 250 men advancing on 19. The German commander on that field would have liked what he saw through his field glasses. A thin American line, no armor of any weight to speak of, a company that by every rule of war was about to be rolled up and destroyed. The rules very nearly held. Almost at once, one of the American M10 tank destroyers took a direct hit and began to burn, black smoke pouring up into the white sky. The second backed away, slid into a ditch, and was out of the fight. In the space of a few minutes, the arithmetic on that field had become brutally, mathematically simple. 19 men and no working armor could not stop 6 vehicles and 250 infantry. Any officer worth his commission could read that equation in an instant. Audie Murphy read it too, and he made the only sane decision available to him. And then, immediately, an insane one. The sane decision came first. He ordered his 19 men to pull back, into the trees, into the cover of the woods, out of the open killing ground where the German armor could grind them into the snow. He would not spend their lives to buy a few useless minutes. Get back, he told them. Hold in the tree line. Then came the part that no field manual would ever have told him to do. He did not go with them. Instead, Murphy stayed forward, alone, at the very edge of the woods, with a field telephone in his hand. That telephone was a thin wire running back to the one weapon that could still change the math on this field: American artillery. Miles to the rear sat the guns, and Murphy meant to be their eyes. Here it is worth pausing on that weapon, because it is central to what happened next, and to what the German soldier of 1944 and 1945 had learned to fear most. It was not, in the end, the American rifleman with his casual slouch that haunted German veterans. It was American artillery. The U.S. Army had refined a way of massing the fire of many scattered gun batteries onto a single point on the map, coordinated so precisely that every shell could arrive at almost the same instant. A sudden, complete eruption with no walking barrage to warn you it was coming. No whistling, ranging shots to let you dive for cover. One moment the field was empty. The next, it was full of steel. German after-action reports and interrogations came back to this again and again. Of everything the Americans threw at them, it was the artillery, falling out of a clear sky with impossible speed and volume, that they dreaded above all. Audie Murphy, standing alone at that tree line with a telephone to his ear, was about to become the human eye, directing exactly that. He began calling the fire in, reading the German advance, and walking each salvo closer, correcting round by round, dragging that curtain of steel across the snow toward the oncoming infantry. And for the moment, the Germans did not even know he was there, but they kept coming. And out in front of Murphy, halfway between him and the enemy, sat that first M10 tank destroyer, the one that had been hit and abandoned, now burning steadily in the snow, its fuel and its stored ammunition slowly cooking inside its open hull. To any sane soldier, a burning tank destroyer is not cover. It is a bomb that has not yet found its reason to go off. Audie Murphy walked out to it and climbed on top. Now shift for a moment and picture all of this from the German side, because that is where the real story of Holtzwihr lives. You are a German infantryman in that white field. You have armor rolling ahead of you. You have the numbers better than 10-1. You have just watched the thin American line melt back into the woods exactly as your officers said it would. This should be the easy part. The advance to the village should be rolling forward. Instead, the world around you begins to come apart. The snow erupts in great black gouts of earth and steel, artillery that seems to know precisely where you are, that corrects itself and chases your squads across the open ground with a speed that makes no sense. There is no safe direction to run because the fire keeps finding you. And then, through the smoke, a heavy machine gun opens up from an impossible place. The wreck of an American tank destroyer, your own guns, already killed and left burning. The dead machine is somehow killing you, and you cannot understand it. On top of that burning hull, fully exposed, Audie Murphy had taken hold of the M10's 50 caliber machine gun, a heavy weapon that fired rounds the length of a man's hand, and turned it on the German infantry. For nearly an hour, he stood there. One man, on a burning wreck, sweeping the field with the heavy gun in bursts, and in the same breath lifting the field telephone back to his ear to keep correcting the artillery falling around him. The German riflemen could see the muzzle flashes stabbing out of the smoke, but they struggled to place the single figure behind them, and they could not make sense of why a tank they had destroyed would not stop fighting. At one point in that hour, the artillery officer on the far end of the telephone line, hearing how chaotic it had become, asked Murphy how close the Germans had gotten to his position. By then, they were within a stone's throw, close enough to see clearly. Murphy's answer, remembered ever after, was to tell the man on the line to hold on a moment, and then to give a correction that brought the falling shells down, almost on top of his own burning perch. He was calling the steel onto himself, trusting the smoke and the wreck to shield him, because that was where the Germans now were. Somewhere out in that field was a single German rifleman who had crossed half a continent to reach it. Perhaps a veteran of the Eastern Front, a man who had survived the horrors of Russia and believed, after all that nothing on a battlefield could surprise him anymore. He had been told this would be simple. A broken American company, a short advance, a village taken before dark. Instead, he found himself pinned in the open by artillery that fell without warning and a machine gun firing from a corpse of a tank, unable to advance, unable to properly retreat, watching men around him fall to an enemy he could not even see. Whatever contempt he had carried for the soft, slouching Americans drained out of him in that hour and was replaced by something colder. This was not the war he had been promised. This was something he could not explain. Multiply that one man's bewilderment by every German soldier on that field, and you begin to understand what really happened at Holtzwihr. It was not simply that one American was brave. It was that an entire attacking force, confident and superior on paper, ran headlong into a wall it did not believe existed and shattered against it. Everything about that hour should have killed him. The tank destroyer beneath his boots could have exploded at any second, its cooking ammunition finding its spark. Small arms fire cracked past him from 3 directions. Shrapnel tore into his leg, and he kept firing anyway, bleeding onto the hot steel. He was a single silhouette wreathed in black smoke, wounded, standing on a bomb, refusing to come down. And slowly, impossibly, the German attack, the one with all the armor and all the numbers and all the certainty, began to come apart. Every push toward the village ran into that falling curtain of artillery and that impossible, unkillable machine gun. The advance slowed, then it stalled. Then it began to pull back, dragging its wounded across the snow. The most powerful force on that field had been stopped cold by the one thing it had never put into its calculations: a single wounded lieutenant on a burning tank. A man it had dismissed as part of a beaten, retreating company, not worth a second thought. Only when the machine gun's ammunition was finally gone did Audie Murphy climb down off the wreck. Bleeding from his leg, half deaf from the guns, he did not go to the rear. He walked back to his 19 men, waiting in the trees, refused to be evacuated, pulled the company back together, and led them forward in a counterattack to take back the ground the Germans had tried to seize. In roughly 1 hour, one soldier had killed or wounded an estimated 50 of the enemy and held a position that 19 men and 2 tank destroyers could not. For that afternoon at Holtzwihr, Audie Murphy was awarded the Medal of Honor, his nation's highest decoration for valor. By the end of the war, he had become the most decorated American soldier of the entire Second World War, earning nearly every award for bravery his country could bestow, several of them more than once, along with high honors from France and Belgium. And he had done all of it before his 21st birthday. The boy the Marines had sent home for being too small. The kid they had wanted to hand an apron. The German soldiers who advanced across that field at Holtzwihr had made, in the space of a single hour, the very same mistake the recruiters in Texas had made years before. They looked at what stood in their way, and they saw something small, something that could be brushed aside on the way to the village. They were wrong in the way that costs an army a battle and hands the other side a legend. But Audie Murphy's story did not end on that frozen field, and this is the part that matters most. When the war was over, his boyish face and his impossible record made him famous. Hollywood came calling, and in 1955 he starred as himself in the film of his own memoir, To Hell and Back. A small man from Texas reenacting for the cameras the impossible things he had actually done in the snow and the mud of Europe. But the war did not stay on the screen when the lights came up. For the rest of his life, Audie Murphy carried it with him. The sleepless nights, the nightmares, the sudden reflexes and dark moods of a man who could never fully leave that frozen field behind. Today, we have a name for it: post-traumatic stress. In his time, most men were expected to simply swallow it in silence. Murphy would not. Using the fame his courage had earned him, he spoke openly about the invisible wounds that soldiers carry home long after the shooting stops, and asked his country to care for them. It was a quieter kind of bravery than standing on a burning tank, and in its own way, a harder one. The United States military tried more than once to turn Audie Murphy away for being too small to matter. The German army spent 1 hour at Holtzwihr learning the same lesson the recruiters had missed. In the end, the size of the man was never the thing worth measuring.